back to the point of governments not wanting any competition for against their currency, Bitcoin is absolutely becoming competition.
Every gold investor should consider top quality assets partnered with the best in the business, a real portfolio to profit. Gold year to date is up 22%. However, a portfolio that is positioned correctly should be up 155% this year. To learn more about how you can begin to enjoy the bull market in gold, visit futuremoneytrends.com/fortune.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. I'm Kenneth Amaduri, and I'm joined today with Jsnip4, Joe, returning guest, a favorite here at Crush the Street, truth teller of the non-conforming alternative media. Check him out at his website, realistnews.net, and of course on YouTube at Jsnip4. Joe, thanks for coming on the show with me today.
It is, as always, a pleasure. It's been a little bit since we last talked, but a whole lot to talk about, I can guarantee you that.
Yep, I got a few things on my notes here that I definitely want to get to here, and I know you follow the WebBot report very closely, and you know, Cliff High is talking about chaos in the global markets, initiating itself in Europe and spreading worldwide through a currency crisis, bond crisis, really because of failures in Italy, banking failures in Italy. So let's start here. I mean, are we starting to see this unravel?
I think it's safe to say, yeah. I mean, you could look at last year and kind of saw the writing on the wall. And that's, speaking of the WebBot, it talked about way before anyone was even using the word Italy or Italian banking, crisis. And then all of a sudden we have this bank that's like the oldest bank in the world. I think it was created like 1400 something, Monte Paschi. And they're saying, well, we need to raise $5 billion in capital. And we're good, we're fine, we're solvent. And they can only raise half a billion. They need $5 billion. They raised $500 million. And of course, now the state to the rescue. Italy comes in. Oh, we're going to buy a 70% stake, and they're saying we're about to issue $15 billion in, corporate debt, basically for the bank. As if the whole world's going to want that. They could only raise $500 million to begin with. Now all of a sudden, investors want $15 billion of their garbage. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's insane. But yeah, that's kind of the writing on the wall. Same with Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank's not in any kind of better condition than it was, several months ago in Germany. It's just going to be one crisis after the other. I think 2017 could potentially be the year where we really finally start to see it, where the average person can start to see it manifest. I mean, you look at Mexico right now, our neighbor. They jumped the gas price up 20%, the government did, overnight, several days ago, no warning, just all of a sudden. And I think it had to do with the last kind of straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, when Trump is making more deals to get stuff out of Mexico and back into America. But it's crushing them. Their peso fell again. I think this morning I was looking at it, was back down again, really low. They're out there. I mean, there was a story where someone rammed a car into a line of police to get it, at a gas pump. They're protesting left and right. This is right across the border from San Diego. And I'm thinking, last year I went to, around June, I went over there to get a little surgery on my foot. And I'm thinking, man, if that was right now, I might not even be able to go across the border. I mean, and this is happening now, but no media is really covering it as far as the mainstream goes. They're not really covering this. They're not really covering Venezuela, which is like practically in a civil war right now. It's just, I mean, it's happening. You just got to see it. But to kind of answer your question about 2017, I think this could be the year when all hell starts to break loose. I don't know that it'll be finished. We may see worse in 2018. And I know a lot of people have a lot of faith in Trump, and I'll be honest, I do too. But this is beyond Trump. This is beyond that. I mean, he wants to add $9 trillion to the deficit over the span of, I think, 10 years. So they're like, all right, let's get this bill passed, and in that bill, let's put, $9 trillion in there. And you say, well, Obama added $10 trillion in 8 years. He wants to add, 9 or almost 10, whatever trillion in 10 years. And I think I've got news for everybody. There ain't no way we're only going to be spending $10 trillion in 10 years. There's just way too much stuff that we blow the money on. The government blows the money on, needs the money. How are they going to fix Medicaid? How are they going to fix this, Obamacare, which they're wanting to keep the good stuff, such as everyone's approved, but take out all the bad stuff. Well, one of the bad stuff, as far as I'm concerned, is like someone like me who doesn't want to get health insurance. Don't make me pay these fees at the end of the year or tax time because I chose not to get insurance. It's ridiculous. But you look at what he did today. He was talking, the CNN guys trying to, let me answer the question. Let me answer the question for you, Mr. Trump. He's like, no, you don't get that. You're fake news. You're not getting a question, which was epic. It was a fantastic response. it was great to see that. And that tells me, he really is for the people. He knows who these clowns are out there. But these so-called clowns out there, or the club, they control the financial system across the world. So even though he's the president, I think he might be about to find out who's in charge, so to speak, as we get through 2017. He's really pissing a lot of these guys off, but I don't know. I mean, I think we're going to be off to a kind of a rocky start. I know it's not right this second. Markets were rallying. We're almost at 20,000 Dow, which, by the way, you spoke about the Webbot thing with the predictions. It said years and years and years ago, I mean many, many years ago, as in probably more than 10, 12 years ago. And he was having a conversation. I remember reading it on one of the websites he was having with his friend at the time, was named George Year. And it wasn't an argument per se, but it was kind of like, what I think will happen, what you think will happen. And Cliff was saying, we're going to see $20,000. I mean, the data is showing we will see $20,000 Dow before the next crash happens. And his friend was like, oh, that's crazy. There's no way it'll go that high. But
wow.
It did. We're there right now, but we haven't had the crash yet, at least the second crash from 2008. So that's an interesting number. Another thing we can chat about for a second, Bitcoin. Right before, this interview, I was just kind of checking some mail and stuff, and I saw someone replied or just posted something on Twitter and added me to it. So I got the notification. And as you may or may not be aware, we had Bitcoin at over $1,100 something dollars. It dropped down to high 800s, went back up to 900,000 again. Now today it was back down to like 800. And the screenshot that they took and sent it to us, it was a chart of Bitcoin for today. And there was a point in time where the number or price for Bitcoin was 888.88. And Cliff had just recently said, as in a few weeks ago, we will see these numbers keep coming out of the Webbot report, 888, and then there was 888888 or something like the extra eights, and then he said there was another one tied to the Chinese currency, the yuan, that was like 808080, something like that. But when I did the conversion, it was way higher, Bitcoin than we've ever seen. So that may be a future price possibly, or just a major devaluation of the Chinese currency that sets it there. But I found it fascinating that this thing said $888. We're going to get to 1,000 in Bitcoin, and then it's going to come back down, and it's going to bounce around, and this 888 number keeps coming up. So that's kind of a key point for this.
Sure.
And then after it deals with that, it's going to go past 1,000, and then it should be good to go like to the next leg up, kind of like record-setting highs. So I've seen 888 numerous times over the last few days, and then today they sent me the screenshot, whoever this person was, where it was actually 888 and 88 cents. Like, wow. You got to be kidding me. It's incredible.
Well, I know he's talking about end of January here, Bitcoin likely going, close to 1,500. And I mean, that's close. That's imminent, I did want to talk about Bitcoin, and I'm glad you got into that. So, I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, first let me tell you, Wade, because I'll say something about Bitcoin, but I always have to say, or at least say, kind of give everyone the story on Bitcoin and what the real truth of what it is. And I've had kind of an argument with a few people. I keep telling everyone, regardless of what it does performance-wise, and it's fantastic, because this thing, at one point years ago, was at $2 and some change. Could you imagine owning 100 of these at $2? You're in $200.
Well, I think in January 1st, 2011.
Right now? Right, exactly.
That was 30 cents.
But the issue is, or not really the issue, but what is Bitcoin? It's nothing more than an online digital currency that has no backing. There's no backing like gold and silver. Gold and silver can back a currency. Bitcoin, if it's acting like a currency, which it kind of is, but really it's acting more like a commodity because countries aren't accepting it as a currency, although you can buy and sell a few things every great once in a while. You might run into a place that says, oh, we accept Bitcoin, so you could theoretically use it as a currency or a trade, but it's still backed by nothing. And someone said, well, yeah, but the people who mine it, on their computers or the hardware, that's the backing. I said, no, that's not the backing, because the argument can be made about gold and silver. I'm the miner, and I'm mining it out of a giant tunnel or on the side of a mountain, old school style even, or with heavy equipment. That doesn't mean my heavy equipment's the backing of gold. Gold's the backing ultimately, and it again, money has to have these intrinsic pieces for it to be considered money, and it has to store value, and it has to be weighted. You have to be able to weigh it.
So the thing about Bitcoin, Joe, that I wanted to point out is that people value it because of its structurally sound infrastructure. And, the tech guys that have explained it to me have, a lot of confidence in it, much more confidence than they would, say, the US dollar, which is fiat, but can be easily printed on a printing press. But Bitcoin is just, the process is already set, a limited amount of currency and coins and the transparency. And as the infrastructure grows, it's very much valuable as people continue to use it, and it's different in the sense that it's not backed by nothing per se. Would you agree with that?
Well, put it this way, because I know whenever I talk about it, it always sounds like I might be bashing it, but I'm not necessarily bashing it. It's just that people have to understand what it is first. It is essentially meets the definition of fiat because it's not backed by some asset. There is no asset backing it. You couldn't take in, if I'm a miner of Bitcoin and I've got my PC with, 12 video cards or two different PCs with 12 video cards, and I'm mining Bitcoins, I can't take my PC with the 6 video cards in one and 6 in the other and say, oh, I defaulted on something, so here's my, mining equipment. It just, what I mean? If gold's the backing of something and you default on it with paper obligations like money, well, here's the gold. The thing is, we're not using gold anywhere in the world these days for backing anyway, so it almost doesn't matter. So you have paper fiat currency, and then you have this digital thing called Bitcoin. Like you said, the interesting thing is you can't just print Bitcoins. So if technology gets greater and more powerful and they can mine these things faster, the hash code that they have to crack in order to get the Bitcoins becomes exponentially harder. So it has kind of a built-in checks and balances to where no matter how hard you hit it, it's going to slowly produce the Bitcoins. So if you've got a full Bitcoin right now, and those things can be broken up into hundreds, thousands, even further, down the decimal point, I could send you, 0.00045, of a Bitcoin, and that could, equate to some US dollar value, let's say. So on one hand, you could say, well, anyone early to that game, let's assume countries were using Bitcoin all of a sudden for currency. Well, again, like you said, they can't print it like they can at the Federal Reserve or the European Central Bank or whatever, where they just print money and borrow it into existence. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is being created, and there's only going to be, like you said, a finite amount that's ever created, and then it's done, which means whatever's out there has to be broken down in the decimal fractions in order for the rest of the world to use it. So I think if people are early on this, and right now it's still early, even at $800, $900 an ounce, or not an ounce, but a Bitcoin, this thing could potentially go crazy. Now, we do have to, possibly accept something here. Governments do not, under any circumstances, want a competing currency. If you look at gold and silver, they control the price on their paper exchanges, the futures contracts on the COMEX, and they're able to do that because they're not buying and selling silver or gold. They're buying and selling paper contracts that are massively leveraged and have a tiny bit of backing of the actual metals, but they have enormous amount of paper being traded back and forth, so they can flood the market, cause the price to go down, hold back on their contracts, cause the price to go up. They can do whatever they want with it. With Bitcoin, there's no such mechanism whatsoever. The only thing that any government can do is say, well, we need to go out and buy as much of these damn things as possible so that we become the market. The problem is, when everyone else wants to go and get it, if there's a very tight supply, the price has to go way up. So then the government that bought them has to go and start selling them in quantity to keep some kind of price that they're trying to achieve. Except if more people keep coming on scene, they're going to run out of everything they've already scooped up. So I think from the big price jump we saw back in 2011 or whatever, 2012, whatever it was, when Bitcoin hit, almost $1,200 or maybe they hit $1,200, whatever it was. And then this giant pullback, and then it was down in the 250 range, 225, 220, and it just kind of sat there and sat there and sat there. I personally think that was some government, probably ours, but some government scooped up as much as they could so that they could buy up most of it. But again, people are mining them, some more are coming on, and there's just too much want or need for these Bitcoins across the world, so people are trying to buy them. Government doesn't have any choice at that point but to start selling them. So they can't manipulate like they do every single thing else, which is interesting because I just read the other day, and I think I did a video on this or mentioned it, where they're trying to get like an ETF or like some kind of paper traded fund for Bitcoin. And I said, if they get that passed and that becomes a thing, then they'll probably be able to control the price of Bitcoin. So the other thing is, whether that happens or not, back to the point of governments not wanting any competition for against their currency, Bitcoin is absolutely becoming competition. People like in China are massively into it right now. They are putting all their money into this thing because they keep seeing their currency getting devalued, and they've got capital controls by the government. The government's not letting their funds leave the country. They can't go elsewhere and invest. It's like on grid lockdown practically over there for their financial system. So they're trying to find creative ways to store their wealth. So they're dumping it into Bitcoin. So of course, China's, I'm reading these articles last 2-3 days, China government to crack down on exchanges and make sure that they're looking for, illegal activity within Bitcoin and to rectify it and point it out to the government if they find anything. But at the stroke of midnight, if they wanted to, and that goes for us in America, goes for China, goes for anywhere, the government can, at any point, through the stroke of a pen, outlaw, ban, etc. Bitcoin, and it's done. It's finished. Mm-hmm. Because it does compete with their currencies. But are they going to do that? Will they do that? It's anybody's guess. Webbot seems to think the prices are going to go up considerably higher for Bitcoin, along with gold and silver. But I've got to tell everybody listening, and as crazy as it sounds with this Webbot saying, predicting future events, and no, it's not perfect. It doesn't get everything right. But for whatever reason, I don't know if I've ever seen a particular subject, such as Bitcoin, in the Webbot report, where this thing has practically like 100% track record on Bitcoin. The moves, the prices, the numbers, it's just unbelievable when I sit back and look at it. And remember, at the end of 2015, he was saying, we're going to see this price move from about it's going to go into the 400s, 408 to 428, then back down. It's going to do this 3 times. Then it should go up and stay above that. And it has absolutely done it. And I'm looking back thinking, well, this thing stood at 250 and stuff forever. And then he just, all of a sudden, here's a report that says that's about to change pretty rapidly, and it did. And he also said attached to this $1,000 move in silver, in Bitcoin, not move, but when it gets to 1,000, for whatever reason, that is attached to another thing in the Webbot, precious metals, should start rising pretty rapidly. Not sure how soon after, though, but that was a precursor event to that happening. So we've already seen it hit 1,000 here recently, finally, in the number of years that it took. And it also said the 888 thing, watch that, it's going to bounce back down, and then it's going to go back up. We've seen that over the last few days. So again, I look at this thing and saying, I know it doesn't get everything right, but boy, oh boy, is this thing unbelievable on Bitcoin right now. And it's saying there's a lot more room to go with the price of Bitcoin, and it's going to drag essentially precious metals up with it. Not that they're related, but they're going to make a big move up too, which sure. I personally think may have to do with Trump being in the White House finally. Because when they were campaigning, him, and his team, and Hillary on the Democratic team, I noticed Gary Gensler, who was the head person in charge. There's I think a panel of 6, commissioners or whatever, but there's like a head one of the COMEX market exchange, and he was he's a bankster, so they never found any wrongdoing. Nope, nothing being manipulated. They would never look into it. So he left a while back, but now he was running Hillary Clinton's campaign finance, whereas Donald Trump picked this other guy from Goldman, the guy he now has, Mr. Munich or whatever. So why? My question to everybody would be, if Trump's not a good guy, or whatever you want to call it, why did the bad guy, Gary Gensler, go to Hillary's campaign instead of Trump? And why did he pick somebody else? So I feel like all that whole old school group that's manipulating everything, that was the Hillary Clinton side of things. That's the people who went over there with her. And then the people who are not down for that stuff are going with Trump, even though he's had some incredibly interesting picks, ex-Goldman Sachs guy, ex-banker, I get it. But if you look at his bashing on CNN and the fight that's happening, and John McCain with this stupid story about him and these kids, sexual thing with the kids, that turned out to be a complete lie. It's these people, there's clearly two sides, so I have to sit back and say, regardless of these picks that he's making, which I'm bothered a little bit, there has to be a method to his madness, and he's doing this for some reason. Perhaps he's putting these people in charge to say, look, you guys know this system in and out. You know how they've been manipulating it. You know all about it because you, at some point, to some extent, were a part of this. So we're now going to fix these things. I personally think maybe Trump is going to stop this manipulation crap, whether it's slowly or abruptly. I'm not sure. I have no idea. Webbot's not suggesting anything either. But I just feel that now that he's in there, we could potentially see these things rise to levels we've been waiting on all these years.
Well, I love it. And I like what you said about Bitcoin being, related, not directly related, but the move in the Bitcoin price triggering gold and silver. And I can see that too, because Bitcoin, it's like, precious metals moving in 2016 and kickstarting the mining sector. And then, even now we're seeing uranium start to move. And, last year, we were seeing the other commodities like copper and zinc. And, one kind of kickstarts the other. And, the investment enters those trades to a larger degree. But interesting thing you were saying about Bitcoin is the counterparty risk. Essentially, the counterparty risk being governments and their ability to crack down on it with some sort of law. And that is interesting. Of course, it would go into a black market demand, which I don't know if we could see it spike to the highs that everyone's hoping for in the black market. But at the same time, would the governments really be able to control it? And some people are concerned about the governments ultimately being able to shut down the internet, and that being a crackdown on Bitcoin. Is this, first of all, is the government shutting down the internet a reality and a threat to Bitcoin, in your opinion?
In my opinion, definitely in my opinion only, it could very well be reality. I don't know necessarily that they would shut the internet or call, and when I use the word shut the internet down, everybody needs to understand, so-and-so terrorist group, ISIS today, did such and such and the grid went down. Okay, that's what that means, by the way. Whether we believe it was really ISIS or the government with one of their, stooge rogue agencies doing some of this crap for, reasons of getting 9/11 type of Patriot Act bills passed, in a hurry that normally they would never be able to get passed. But I mean, I just did a story last night or the day before on my channel, and it was just talking about this. I said, oh, here we go. They're saying that, there's a high probability all of a sudden that the grid's going to get attacked, and, there's going to be malware in there and whatever. And I've referred to everyone. I said, there's an interview that was done. I think it was 60 Minutes. It was many years ago. And they had some guy from like the State Department or wherever he was from. They tell his title there. And she was asking, how the heck did they pass this 9/11 bill so fast, the Patriot Act? It was multiple, quite a few pages. They passed it in like 2 weeks. Where did it come from? How could they write that? And he said, oh, it was already written. And she says, what do you mean it was already written? Why would something like that be already written? He says, well, we have legislation for worst case disaster scenarios on standby that under the right circumstances we'd have to get passed. 9/11 was that circumstance. So she then said, well, is it safe to say, because they were talking a little bit about cyber issues and things, and she said to him, is it safe to say that you guys or the government has kind of a 9/11 cybersecurity bill on standby waiting for the right event? He said, absolutely. So to me, that said it all many, many years ago, that something like that could happen. Because think about this, if they can knock out the electric grid somewhere, and let's just say, I don't know, the East Coast, New York side, Wall Street, etc., and the stock market's down, and they could blame the entire crash of the markets and anything financial on some bogus, whatever you want to call it, terror group, and say this is the reason that happened, and we're going to do this, we're going to pass this legislation. If we would have had this legislation passed before, this, we would have been able to stop this from happening. And of course, it'll be more crap where, now everybody's going to be known. You can't post on the internet without people knowing who you are and all this stuff, It's just, that's where this always leads. What I'm hoping, though, is that under a president like Trump, that kind of crap doesn't happen. But again, when the club is running things behind the scenes, they can make that stuff happen and then throw it on Donald Trump's plate all of a sudden. Here you go, sign this into law. All your Congress passed it. You're going to just sit here and do nothing? They're going to attack us again. They're going to do it again if you don't pass this. What do you do as the president? Oh, crap. If I don't do this and we get hit again, they might be able to impeach me for my lack of not doing anything. Well, I'm going to have to sign this into law, and I don't like it, but I'm going to have to. So you already see where his stance is on the intelligence agencies. He doesn't believe them. He's flat out said it. He doesn't believe them. So it's like, holy crap! What kind of president would come out and say one of the most what's supposed to be prestigious and worthy organizations within a government is the intelligence agency? And you're basically butting heads with the president. I mean, this isn't good, but that's how these people operate. They will make some event happen so that they can get stuff passed that they need to get passed. And if it means, Bitcoin getting shut down, internet getting shut down, etc., that's it. So that is one thing people have to think about. But do you know how many businesses would be potentially out of business, done, finished, if the internet went down for any real length of time? So I don't know that the government would let it last long. If it was, it would be something where it went out, it would be brutal and quick, and you'd hear all the news about it. Oh my God, they'd pass the legislation, and then all of a sudden the internet comes back on. So 2-3 days, it's back up.
Wow.
And then they got their legislation passed. But there would be some damage, of course, to businesses. Look at, for God's sake, could you imagine the loss Amazon would take in 3 days of being shut down with the amount of, traffic and money they do?
Sure.
But not that it would hurt a company like that. They wouldn't go under because of that. But some smaller companies potentially could get hurt enough in 3 days. They may have contracts with people. Hey, you guarantee uptime and you guarantee this. There's no clause in there for, terror attack or a grid going down. And, it caused problems. But again, these people don't care. They only want to get their legislation passed to cause, the next leg down and, freedoms or whatever. But, again, I'm a little bit hopeful. I'm not usually hopeful on stuff because I've been seeing this stuff for so long and seeing how they operate. But to see Trump in there and him attacking these people, literally, verbally anyways, and it's real, it's not fake, gives me a little bit of hope that maybe we won't have to deal with these kind of things, like the grid thing.
Well, I'm hoping he sends a tweet out and crushes the gold cartel one of these days. And just completely...
He's a big gold man. His house, his place in New York is like, he's got a gold toilet, gold doors, He's talking about someone being called Mr. Gold. That should be Mr. Gold. As much as I love Jim Sinclair, but I think Donald Trump might be the real Mr. Gold with how much gold he's got.
Joe, I want to talk about one more topic here, and that is global cooling. And interestingly enough, Cliff High is talking about a major ice age. Actually, I don't know if you want to call it a major ice age, but something we could live through 2025 through 2050. And it's so contrary to the mainstream narrative, of course, to the climate change and global warming and man-made impacts with the carbon emissions and things like that on the environment. And here he is talking about, the complete and absolute opposite. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, first, let's talk about Trump's view on that. Trump is putting people in place that are opposed to the current mainstream nonsense, man-made global warming. He also just put another person in charge of, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whatever, on the vaccine thing. This is fantastic. I mean, this is unbelievably great news. But he doesn't believe in that crap either. So the Webbot, many years ago, talked about this mini ice age that would be coming. So here we are, and I looked at, like right now and even last year before we even got into wintertime, it was still fall. And I remember doing a few videos like, hey, they're having record snow and record cold over here. It's not even freaking wintertime. And I'm like doing a few of these videos. Man, the Webbot talked about this. Look at this. So I've seen it, and I've had people emailing me constantly, hey, look at this. New record cold, new this, new that. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. I know. Webbot told us so. But, yeah, so this mini ice age, it's going to be noticeable. And as he said in the older data, the older Webbot reports, he was saying when this comes, in these Webbot reports, when this winter thing comes, this mini ice age, so to speak, comes, it's going to completely destroy the current global warming crowd's nonsense. And not those words per se, but it's going to completely crush the mainstream view. It's going to be finished. It'll be history. So you can kind of see it now. I mean, number one, Trump's already positioning himself to get rid of that nonsense. And I can tell people right now, I remember looking into this years and years and years ago because it was one of the things that kind of woke me up, because I've said this on his show before. I believed in Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth when I first saw it. And then I did research, and it was completely debunked. But one of the things I learned, and I saw the same source that they showed, which was NASA data, satellite data in space, of course, that showed like all of the planets heating up at the same time we recognize Earth is going through global warming or global heating. So I said to myself, how in the hell can all these planets be heating up at the same time Earth is, that we're calling, but here it's because of us humans, we're polluting. We're not on freaking Jupiter or Neptune. I mean, what's going on here? So when I started looking at that, I was like, oh, that was the defining moment for me. Okay, this is a complete lie. Satellite data is not going to lie. If it's heating up on Earth and it's heating up on another planet, that tells me there's something else causing it. And in case anyone's wondering what that something is, it's the sun. You have a sun that reacts a certain way, it causes the inner cores of the planets to react a certain way, it causes the heating and whatever. And I've seen ice core sample. I've seen a guy doing a video that he was studying ice core samples. His name was Dr. La Violette. I think that's how you pronounce it. He said, I had 300, 400,000 years of data in what I call the leftover ice core sample from the scientists they didn't need. He said, but for me, it gave me 400,000 years of history, and I could see these rings of these little dark spots, and they were completely spaced out perfectly all the way down. And sometimes they were a little bit darker, sometimes they weren't. There wasn't a rhyme or reason to that. But he said it too. There's global warming, there's global cooling. There's global warming, there's global cooling, and it does not matter whatsoever whether we humans are highly productive and technologically advanced using fossil fuels or whatever, or we're cavemen. It does not matter. The planet does these things. So
yeah,
when I saw that stuff, I was sold at that point. I knew, the Inconvenient Truth thing was nonsense, etc. But I still found it fascinating after all that. The Webbot comes up. Hey, there's going to be a global cooling cycle coming. It's going to be kind of like a mini ice age. And he told me personally through email a few times. He's like, you're in a good spot actually in Florida, Joe. Even with this cold coming in over the next decade or so, being close to that equator, you stand a good chance to not deal with much of the stuff that the Webbot's forecast about some of the stuff. And I'll let people know in one of the recent reports it was saying when this stuff really gets going with the cold, you're going to hear stories, and this could be years out, but you're going to hear stories of airplanes falling out of the sky because they've iced up their wings so badly that tons of ice have formed, and it just drops them right out of the sky.
Wow.
But this is going to be out in the future. But just to give you an idea, I guess, of how cold it's going to be outside. And another thing we'll touch on real quick, I've been getting flooded lately with emails from my subscribers. Hey, didn't the Webbot talk about atmospheric rivers and coming out of the sky, these massive rainstorms that would be called rivers? I'm like, yes, absolutely. And they're like flooding me with these stories from California. That is the exact keyword phrase that the news and the meteorologists are using in California recently. Atmospheric rivers pouring down. Webbot called this way in advance. They used the exact word that it said this is what you're going to hear in the news. And I'm like, this is incredible.
Wow.
Here it is.
That's a word that really was never used before, I take it.
No, I mean, did someone ever say it? Sure, but, because someone might argue, well, the Webbot found, someone saying it, 15 years ago, and it made a prediction. The Webbot doesn't work that way. And I can, a general way this thing works is kind of like Google or any search engine. It sends out these spiders that follow sites, and every time there's a link on a site, it follows it. So it keeps following link after link to find every single site on the face of the earth that it can find, store those pages as data, and then we search for stuff, and that's what we get back. Cliff High's webbot sends out spiders, but they're also tuned to look up different languages. So it could be Chinese, it could be Russian, it could be numerous different languages, plus, of course, English. And when it sees not just a word like, rain in the sky, the word atmospheric river would be a word that humans don't normally use. So that would definitely be a good hit for it to grab. But if it just sees it once or twice or a few times, it's not enough. It needs to get it an enormous amount of times. It has to be found in different languages, and it has to be found that these two languages, for example, they're not the same message board, which you normally wouldn't find in English and a Chinese message board. But, if the Chinese are talking about something and the Americans are talking about something and another country's talking about something and they somehow have the same keyword and they're somehow related, like the subject matter, and this is probably a poor way of describing the details of how the webbot works, but it's close as I can get, and it stores it, and then he gets to look at the data to make his interpretation on what this is saying. And that's one of the things it said, atmospheric rivers. That's not something you would be able to look up and see these terms all over the place until recently. Now it's all over the place, but the webbot said this a while back. So that's why I follow this thing. It's incredible to me, and it's fascinating. And people will kind of give you crap sometimes because, well, what about all the stuff it misses? How come you don't do videos? Well, because the disclaimer right off the bat, it's not going to get everything right, and I'm not interested when it doesn't get right. I'm only interested when it does get right, because it's better than chance that it got it right. So I want to focus on when it got right, and some of the keyword in.
That's a good point.
Just with saying, with one of the things that it's kind of a key thing about the webbot. The longer something is in there and it keeps showing up and keeps showing up and keeps showing up month after month or year after year, there's this data that's just still in there, but it hasn't happened yet. It's like you could be rest assured it is written in stone. This is going to happen, but it's going to be hard to say when. And silver and gold exploding to obscene prices is one of those things that has been in this webbot report over and over and over and over and over. So I know some people may have been in $30s and $40 for silver, and they may think, God, this has been going on for years. How much longer do I have to take of this? Now, my answer is I'm not 100% sure. I don't know how much longer. But the first thing you should have been thinking about was you would never got into this to get it rich quick. You knew you'd have to wait some time period. But I will say I firmly believe you will be rewarded massively, handsomely, if you just remain patient. Because believe me, the club, they can manipulate and manipulate until the last person says, I've had enough, I'm selling out. And then the prices go up. And then you say, damn it, why did I do that? Because they've got you figured out. They know the human mind. They are experts on how to manipulate everybody, and they know exactly what you can and cannot withstand normally, and they will take it to the limit so that you sell off everything, and then that price just explode, and then you're sitting there saying, what in the hell did I just do? Why did I just freaking wait? So cheer up, everybody, and just wait. That's all I'm telling you.
Well, hey, man, those are some great closing thoughts. Jsnip4, Joe. Joe, if people want to learn a little more, obviously, just the things that we talked about are things that you discuss all the time. You go into great detail on your YouTube channel, and your website is great as well. But if there's anything else that you wanted to share and let our audience know about, please do so.
I will end this by saying, or add an additional thing and say, the real estate market, the trend for the real estate market going out many, 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 many years is bad, is down. Okay, that's where this is heading. Doesn't mean we might have a little blip of another high. We've recently had highs again in the real estate market, matched with some of the 2006 pricing, which was the all-time high. I'm here to tell everybody they have to raise rates ultimately. You've already seen them start. When rates go up, there's no choice. It's automatic. Real estate pricing goes down. It is going to happen. It's already happening in some places, especially with high-end real estate, but then it's going to happen everywhere. So if anyone's thinking about, should I sell my house? I was thinking about it. Maybe I want to wait. My answer, if it was me, I would have sold as fast as possible and wait. I'll go rent a place and wait, because I really, truly believe, and the webbot has said this too, that there are going to be some fire sales to be had in the real estate market. But it'll take a little while, but that's the trend going out, and it's not going to be a short trend. This is going to be a trend that goes out for a number of years. And I'm thinking at least, even Martin Armstrong's work shows that up to like 2030, 2032, from his cycle charts that he deals with, his economic confidence model, as he calls it, shows like 2032 is the end of this cycle, and the current cycle just started last year. So we're at the beginning of the top going down. It could be a slow. I'm not saying it may happen overnight or, in 2 years it can be devastated. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that overall trend is absolutely positively rates have to rise. Therefore, real estate has got to go down. So if you're thinking about buying, you may want to wait. If you're thinking about selling, you should be selling yesterday.
Well, and I think the WebBot has talked about a 90% correction in real estate, which is absolutely huge. That's crazy almost. I mean, I don't even know.
You have a lot of stuff going down, and you have the banking going down. You've got finance problems where credit becomes scarce, because that's always what happens in these crises. Credit becomes scarce. Banks are scared to loan. And when banks are scared to loan, that means very, very few people can even go and get a mortgage. And that's in itself is going to cause the prices of houses to go down. And they may come down to a level where the banks finally say, okay, we don't feel too awfully uncomfortable now. Now we'll go ahead and give a loan to some of these people we wouldn't give it to before, because the prices are, manageable if they default or whatever. So you'll see that. But he was also saying too, Cliff I in the WebBot, you would see, and I don't know how soon this will be either, but in the future, you're going to see banks, because they're going to be hurting, saying anyone who has cash for these houses, and they're going to have a lot of them because they're going to foreclose, and they have the ones they've already foreclosed on sitting there piling up. They're going to say, we want to get rid of this. Here's the normal price. But if you've got cash, because we need to put some money on our, so our balance sheet looks a little bit better, we'll make you a sweetheart deal on this, cash money. So those who have cash will be able to get an even sweeter deal directly from the bank. Because everyone has to understand, when a bank lends money, they lend out usually 90% of what they have. So if you come in, let's say they have a $150,000 house and they're willing to give it to you for $100,000 cash, you just gave the bank $100,000, and some of the banks will take the $100,000 and multiply that by 9 times, and say, okay, here's what we can lend out all of a sudden, based off of keeping this $100,000 in our coffers, so to speak. We can now lend out 9 times that amount. So of course they can lend out a whole lot more money. This is one of the beauties of being a bankster. You get this unbelievable fractional reserve lending system, and then when people default, you also get to keep the asset. So I can spend a whole hour talking about that if I had to, which is ridiculous. But point being, this is the way it goes. This is what history shows. So capitalize by learning about this stuff and taking action now. So again, if you have a house, you can walk away with some cash right now. Do it. Take the cash. Sit on the cash. Buy some precious metals if you haven't already. And I think, man, could you imagine if this ultimate playbook played out, where silver starts spiking, not even to crazy absurd levels, $100 silver even, and housing is crashing down, and all of a sudden banks are letting loose on these foreclosed houses because they need money badly, the prices are dropping, and you say, wow, I get to sell some of my silver for a house. I didn't have to sell all of it. Paid for it cash. Silver's up. I'm happy. This is great. While a lot of other people are saying, no, this sucks. But you can't help people. Again, we can lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And if people would rather watch sports and TV and Facebook and don't tell me doom and gloom, I don't want to hear it. Okay, when your 401k is in trouble, when other stuff's in trouble, sorry. But there's a lot of people who want to learn this stuff. My channel grows every single day by 30, 40, 50, 60, sometimes 100 subscribers, which I'm proud of, because it means I'm doing something. I'm informing people. They're getting the information, and I'm proud of that. I'm happy that, because I want to get people in the right mindset so they understand what's coming and how to protect themselves and for what's about to potentially happen. And the good news is, even if it doesn't happen, even if all this stuff, somehow Donald Trump is the return of Christ and everything's fine, what did you lose? You have precious metals that will never go to zero in your possession. You have an enormous amount of information now on how this gaming this system works. You're now a highly intelligent American citizen again, who has a lot to look forward to. So it's one of those things where you can gain, but you can't lose. No matter what happens.
Hey, I love the way you put that there. Joe, it was really a pleasure having you back on the show and sharing your commentary and educating our audience. Thanks for coming back. And you know what? I look forward to speaking with you, hopefully in another couple months.
Yeah, as we see some stuff unfold, maybe another couple of epic things happen, we'll have plenty to talk about.
I mean, it might be sooner rather than later.
You might be right.
All right, sir. Well, you take care.
You do the same.